Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. Time for more AppSec calculus. A developer implementing passkeys leaves Chicago at 10 a.m. on a train heading west. An AppSec team leaves at noon on a train heading east. How many terms for phishing does the AppSec team come up with by the time the developer is done? Which means this week we chat with Marisa Fagan about maturing security champions programs and reaching effective outcomes. Head west and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Imperva, a Talos company, is the cybersecurity leader that helps organizations protect critical applications, APIs, and data anywhere, at scale, and with the highest ROI. With an integrated approach combining edge, application security, and data security, Imperva protects companies through all stages of their digital journey. Imperva Threat Research and their global intelligence community enable Imperva to stay ahead of the threat landscape and seamlessly integrate the latest security, privacy, and compliance expertise into their solutions. Start a free trial today at securityweekly.com/Imperva. This is episode 294, recorded August 5th, 2024. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here once again with John Kinsella. Hello, John.
I'm rusty. It took me at least a second to find my mute button. I just want to say, good to be back. I got my favorite coffee and with my favorite podcast co-host on my favorite podcast, so I had some good day.
Oh, man has coffee. This is good. And we also have Adrian Sanabria as well. Hello, Adrian.
Hey, always nice to hang out with y'all. I'm a couple hours past coffee time, but yeah, fully caffeinated, ready to go.
Fully caffeinated, ready to go at an undisclosed location next to a pool and a beach. So I think you have us all trumped. But even if you're not at a great location like Adrian is, you can come to InfoSec World 2024 at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort, not too bad, in Lake Buena Vista, Florida, from September 23rd through 25th. Save 25% by using code ISW24-SW25 when you register at securityweekly.com/InfoSecWorld 2024. Marisa is a self-described security culture expert, having spent the last 16 years driving culture change and building communities around security programs. She is head of product at a security champion programs as a service startup called Catalyst. Before that, she built security culture programs at companies like Atlassian, Synopsys, and Salesforce. Hello, Marisa. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see you today.
We're very happy you're here because one of the things that we like to talk about on the show is education, awareness, but doing so in a way that's effective rather than just saying, please write secure code or, please use HTTPS. Those seem a bit vapid and empty and not really outcomes. But maybe to kick things off, I do want to get into your experience where you've come, but to kick things off, we've got there's an OWASP Security Champions Guide that's under development, and it's not a top 10 list, but it does have a couple top 10 things to think about with programs. Tell us a little bit about this new OWASP instruction, this new OWASP guide, as I'm struggling to communicate. Help us demonstrate communication better than I am doing.
That's right. There's a new OWASP Security Champions Guide that's been put out in the past year. And it's such an exciting time as practitioners because this is really information that over the years I really wish that I had had. And this guide, especially coming from OWASP, is really a guide from practitioners. And it's been reviewed by many people in the industry. And because it comes from OWASP, that this is really kind of a volunteer-run organization, and OWASP is going to put together kind of a peer-reviewed guide that really has those best practices that have been hard-earned by the practitioners in the field over many years now. And, it started last year as a manifesto, I think, as many OWASP-type programs do, and they've taken the past year and gotten a bunch of feedback from many people, including myself. Practitioner for many years, and I'm excited that I got to join the group as a contributor. But we're not alone. We would love to ask for more contributors. And if you are currently running a successful Security Champions program, we would love to hear from you. But also, if you're considering starting a Security Champions program in your company, we would love to go on the journey with you. And if you use any OWASP materials, we'd love to get that feedback on how those things were helpful for you.
One of the things you mentioned right at the beginning there, Marisa, was, you wish you had something like this when you were starting. Tell us a little bit about, the why of that, maybe some stumbles, some friendly anecdotes of programs that didn't quite go in a good direction, or, those false starts that you might have run into.
Yes. Stories. I usually think of the early days. In the beginning, this is a lot of just kind of making it up as we go along, and a lot of operating on instinct. That I think it was in 2001, the Gary McGraw book about building secure software came out, and I was but a younger person, and I'm in college doing my degree, and I did an SDLC kind of review. How to build secure software was kind of my thesis in college. And so some of those things really intersected for me. And I was very interested in this intersection. And Gary McGraw and John Viega, they were talking about the intersection of people in secure development and how really this is a people problem. And that was music to my ears, because I, as a born community builder, think people, over processor technology, people are the solution. And when you can get people to incorporate a culture, incorporate a mindset around security, then you've more than won the game, because that's where code begins. And it really is that shift left mentality that has had such a life of its own over the years, started with some like-minded people thinking that really we need to take security mindset to developers where they live and build process around how developers develop and give them the tools. So that's how that's the basis, the foundation. But from there, a lot of things were tried. When I started a program at Salesforce, it was hundreds of developers, 5,000 developers, and we had an instinct that we could get some enthusiastic people to volunteer to join a small cohort of developers that would get extra training and get extra face time with the security team, because they were interested in shadowing threat models. They were interested in contributing more toward the security lifecycle. And it's for various reasons. Some were interested in building their career. Some were interested in security because it's such a fun topic. It's a lot of puzzles and problem solving. And some were, maybe they were architects or senior developers that wanted to make their product more secure and saw this intersection as a way to partner with the security team to build more security practices into their lifecycle. And so at Salesforce, one of the early programs, we had a lot of partners. And not just partners on the development side, we also had partners in the product security team. And we kind of built a bit of a pyramid scheme where we had some product security people responsible for some products and the developers that went along with those. And then I was kind of at the top of a pyramid, the lone technical program manager organizing this whole thing. And so we were doing things at the time. We started with a pilot group. We were doing things that absolutely would not scale. And so that was one of the first things that kind of lessons we learned, was that this effort to expand the reach of the security team in itself was also not something that would scale. And so that was one of the, I think the first lessons that we learned, was that you have to prioritize, you have to start small, and you can't boil the ocean even in a program like this. So we had a lot of anecdotal wins, but even in those early days, creating metrics for program success across the entire company was really challenging.
Yeah, I love the image of the great Pharaoh Fagan at the top of a pyramid, commanding the the security of software to come. And you touched on a little bit of incentives, I think, about, why some motivations for why some of the developers wanted to be part of this. Let's come back to incentives a bit, because there's also the front end of why have a champions program in the first place. And you mentioned scaling, but it perhaps wasn't as effective or successful as you wanted. So let's kind of define upfront, what do you mean, or what should we be calling a security champions program? Because we're also being careful to use program rather than just say a champion, like a single person.
Yeah, there's a lot of behavioral psychology here. And one of the main facets of the Security Champions program is that it is a community of like-minded people coming together to make each other better. And so a lot of those practices of social proof is kind of a big part of this. Like if you see the person in the desk next to you doing something, that kind of legitimizes it for you, and you will also try to pick up those habits. So this is like an effort to kind of plant seeds in development organizations, the security team trying to kind of take a different approach than a governance or a top-down approach for security practices. And and you were kind of also talking about the incentives. They kind of all blend together.
Yeah, it's one of the things I'm curious on, sorry to jump in, is that what about, that just initial convincing the CISO, convincing stakeholders? Like, I imagine obviously a CISO probably has to be part of it. It has security in the title, but what are the stakeholders? How do you communicate to stakeholders that we want you to be part of this, support this, and this is I'll use a loaded term, this isn't a waste of time?
That's right. That's why it is such an exciting time right now, because I really feel like there's this inflection point in the industry. If security culture practices are kind of its own niche. When OWASP created the manifesto and then the guide for security champions, it really spoke to the industry and said that this is a legitimate practice in a way that maybe this, is it OpenSAM? So SAM and BSAM are also talking about security champions. So there are frameworks that talk about security champions, and CISOs are probably familiar with those frameworks, but they're really buried. It's really kind of deep down in those frameworks, and it's just one small piece of a security program. However, OWASP coming out and saying this is a practice that we really encourage, and there's a lot of practitioners behind it saying that this is legitimate, that it will help your security program, really made a huge difference, and that's a recent change. And so, when you come to your executive and you're kind of selling this to them, you should talk about how this is become an industry best practice, that it has frameworks. There's a guide out on the internet called Security Champions Success Guide. The Success Guide you can Google for. And so a lot of independent people are now coming out with resources in order to make this, exactly as you said, seem like a legitimate practice that has a lot of value that other companies are seeing. And then in practice, I think the value that you get from Security Champions programs directly from the start, it's, I think, really important to recognize that a security team's responsibility is to support the development org. It's to support the company. And so a CISO probably has, amongst the many responsibilities and concerns that a CISO has, one of their concerns is probably to support the organization in their efforts to build more securely. And in practice, how do you do that?
Yeah, Marisa, I'm. That makes sense. I totally get it. I agree with you. We're getting more interest out of CISOs and executives overall. So I come at this from a slightly different point of view than Mike. So while Mike's always trying to convince managements to, how can I get them to take me seriously? I am management with the blue pointy hairs, and I'm trying to figure out how can I get this guy to do what I want.
Yep. So
flip that question around. One of the issues, the place I work, we have a very established, very mature security champions program. It's impressive. But still with that, I have a hard time before we go to that nomination stage in the OWASP part, I have a hard time actually getting some of my developers to they'll have interest, but they're like, I don't have time to work on that. So how do we create that part of this? How do you not just spark the interest in them, but go like, yeah, I'm going to actually take the jump and put a little bit of extra effort, or work with my boss to spend a little bit less time coding, but how do we get them to sort of jump in from that side?
The biggest fuel that you can add to your program is recognition.
There you go, say money.
Yeah, money is fuel. I'm sure sometimes it can feel that way. So recognition takes a lot of effort, and it requires a programmatic approach. How do you recognize people on a platform? Do you make that recognition public? Have you given enough airtime at an executive level? Are your champions recognized by their CTO, by the CTO, their leader? And so having not just the CISO buy-in, but the executives at the highest level, maybe the CEO, maybe the CTO, but whatever leaders the developers would feel most pleased to be recognized by. I don't know what your brand is inside the company, but would it be exciting to have lunch with you, or would it be more exciting to have lunch with the CTO as kind of a reward or recognition for being a champion for maybe, if you're a champion for a year, how do you recognize that?
So that's interesting. I'll dive into psychology for a tiny second. I'm just senior enough that the junior engineers are scared to have lunch with me. So, and I'm still...
That's what I was going to say. It sounds terrifying for some people.
I'm still 3-4 levels from the CTO. So, and again, I get what you're going from, but like the dance there becomes like, well, how do I give them like a coupon, go to my favorite lunch place, or some will eagerly want to go grab lunch with me, but some are like, what do I talk to him about? So,
sure. There's intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. I think we're all familiar with this idea that some people are motivated by like physical rewards, prizes, gift cards, hoodies, and other people are actually intrinsically rewarded by something a lot bigger picture. And so lunch with the CTO maybe kind of crosses those borders. It's like a physical thing, but also it's about getting face time with the leader. And so no two companies are the same. The culture at each company is categorically different. Lunch may not be appropriate for a remote first company. However, what is the same in each one is recognition over time that is earned. And so I'm less concerned with who goes to lunch, and more concerned with how do you know who earns that award, and how are they tracked, and how do they know how close they are to an achievement. All of that kind of tracking is why my background is in technical program management, and you really need the resources of a program manager to run this program.
So taking the flip side of that question, how do you keep the program alive? How do you track its health? I imagine there's metrics. You're already talking about the visibility of the program. If it's not seen, it will be assumed that there's no value to it, and a new CTO will come in and axe it, right, or CIO. So just your thoughts on like how to ensure its success over the long term.
Yeah, that is one of the main issues that the OWASP Security Champions Guide talks about, is the longevity of the program. And one of the main tenets is evolving over time. So even in the very beginning, you might start with a trial group. You might start small, and then you're growing. And the more people you add to this program, the more of a bell curve you're going to get with your participation. And so the more kind of normalized things are going to see as far as human behaviors are going to overlap with security champions behaviors. And so you're going to get churn. And having a programmatic way to embrace that, and having a really solid onboarding process that is inviting new people in over time constantly is really important, and part of why it's a programmatic approach. So that's one piece of it, is having an answer for how to keep new people coming into, especially with a company that grows very quickly, you're going to have new people coming in all the time. And then on the opposite side, how do you advance your long tenured champions? How do you give them more opportunities? You kind of sponsorship approach, and maybe those champions can become part of the leadership group that is operating the Security Champions program. And so no one person is a single point of failure for the operations of your program. The more that you can make the champions themselves involved in the operations of the process, the more likely it will be to have longevity. And then the more likely it'll be to be kind of liked, and they will go back and have positive things to say to their managers. And when the question of whether a champions program should still be invested in year over year usually comes from the champions themselves. If there is positive survey feedback that says that champions themselves think that this is a valuable program that they get value out of, to me, that is the most important metric of all, is just kind of an NPS survey style feedback. Do the people involved in the program feel like they are getting value out of it? Yeah, and that metric, I think, sells itself.
And imagine that would go to ability to hire and retain talent, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. If hiring talent is something that is on your leadership's radar, this is great for that, and is really part of a selling point that you can add to career progression ladders. Security Champion as one sort of bell on your ladder is really definitely something that sells the program and gives investment back into the program.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike.
Oh no! Part of the one of the points John was, I think, speaking to, that you were talking about, Marisa, was that idea of incentives. That those, what are the rewards for doing this? But I think we've also perhaps skipped over some of, well, what are the expectations? Like, what is the security champion actually doing? And I'll just seed this with what I think is the complete shouldn't be done, is you, dear champion, are now responsible for, reviewing all the vulns and making sure our vuln SLA is working. That sounds like the best way to tank a champions program right from the very beginning. Nobody wants to do that. So it's easy to come up with what not to do. Help us figure out what to do.
Well, it's different for every maturity level of a company. So I definitely think that you shouldn't expect any more of your developers than you can expect of your own security team. So obviously these it's really nice to have them grow together in responsibilities. But I agree, you can't have a development team doing vuln discovery and like being responsible for their SAST operations. That sort of thing is probably too advanced. But there are a lot of companies that have invested in pretty advanced security champions relationships. I have seen in my own programs at Synopsys, where we had our developers. I mean, this is a very unique case because Synopsys was a security tooling company. And so using Coverity and Black Duck were just part of dog fooding, but our security champions were responsible for SAST and DAST scanning. That was part of it, and they were doing vulnerability management. So in my mind, I do have a vision of pretty deep technical security practices being owned by the security champions. So like most things, there's just a wide variety of what your company is going to be able to absorb. And so that's where this really is a customized thing based on what are the security risks that you care the most about. And I think that if you take a programmatic approach, if you break it down into small parts, if, for example, you make cross-site scripting your focus and you say, not all bugs, not all vulnerabilities, but cross-site scripting, let's talk about that. Security champions maybe can take advanced training and start to look for this one thing. And then maybe you have a quarterly bug bash and you say, okay, we're looking for just cross-site scripting, and we're going to give prizes out for everybody that can help us review all of the code in a hackathon, some 24-hour period where there is an amnesty day, a free-for-all. That's the sort of thing where you can engage and have partnerships on security practices. You cannot throw things over the fence. That's not going to work, as you said. So this is really specifically designed practices for security champions. This is not a security team ProdSec responsibility thrown over the fence to a developer or engineer and expecting that to go well, but rather I do believe in empowering developers and showing them that they have a greater responsibility for their part of the equation. So I've also seen scanning tools that live on the development side, and that goes quite well if it's in the context of this is a development tool or this is a QA tool, and it lives where they live. So I would say there's a lot of variety in what a Security Champions program can absorb.
Part of that variety, it sounds like it comes up as just trying to figure out where is the organization on this maturity, and what is the culture, like what is the current area of focus you want on a culture. So in one way, I kind of doubt that you want your scanner expert on the security side to be running the Champions program. And you already mentioned, like, use the term captain. That's the captain in the OWASP guide. I like I'm trying to go pitch a pharaoh for this. But the whole point here is, you have a curator, someone, as you said, with project management skills. Help us understand a little bit about maybe breaking down what project management mean, or what are those other skills that's important for someone who's actually going to curate a program to make this successful. Because I think that's one thing anecdotally where I've seen it fail. Just someone technical, this is my favorite vuln, we're going to build a program around understanding this vuln, which definitely is too short-sighted, not effective, and misses a lot of things, I think.
I love a program that grows organically, and I think that can only happen with passionate people. And in fact, the OWASP Guide's first principle is passionate people, passionate volunteers as champions, and passionate volunteers as the admins or the project owner of the program. Also every program has its own metaphors. So Pharaoh feels very legitimate to me. A great idea.
Might have some side effects we'll work out, but yes, keep going.
I have seen metaphors of all kinds over the years. I've seen some that are copyrighted by Disney and we can't talk about them. As well as, there's the martial arts metaphors. You've got ninjas and green belts and black belts. That's the program that we're talking about here, if you've seen that before. And so, passionate people. And then I feel like those organizational skills are also incredibly important. And it really takes somebody that's going to drive the manual parts through that we haven't figured out how to operationalize or automate yet. So in my programs, especially over the years, so much of it has been a manual labor of love. You're literally counting how many times people do a certain activity, or you're taking roll call in your Zoom chats, until Zoom has gotten a little bit better about having an API so you can collect an attendance roll for a meeting. It's just somebody that is not afraid to get their hands dirty and actually do those manual things behind the scenes that for the participants makes it kind of seem like a magical veneer of this just works, I get recognized, people see my work and they think that this is really great. It's sort of like a behind the scenes Wizard of Oz situation where a lot of that behind the scenes work is passionate people doing manual tracking and manually trying to push up recognition for the champions at a higher level.
Part of that recognition, one thing I haven't asked you about yet is the idea of security culture, because that's, I think, one of the reasons you have a champions program. You want to increase this. An indicator of security culture, once again, it's much easier to say what it's not. The amount of people attending a meeting, I don't think that's an indicator of security culture. But there are other aspects of that to look at that can be. So how do I, if I'm running a champions program, how do I know that I'm building up a positive security culture or even have a security culture in the first place?
Mm-hmm. So for the listeners at home, I know that you all know the definition of security culture is the behaviors and the values that are in practice. Some people say that it's what people do when you're not looking, or it's what people do when they feel like they're not being watched. those are the values and the practices that make up a culture. And so a security culture is the security related, the kind of risk related decisions, values, and behaviors that people in a company do. And so it's not just which vulnerabilities do they work on, but it's also, do you use a password manager? How do you live the values each day? And there's a couple of measurable signs that you have a very active culture and that you have really good participation and engagement. Some of these tools do have good APIs, and so you can make a little kind of a little dashboard of how much activity is happening in your company. If that sort of thing is what you really need to sell the value, I think it kind of gets in the weeds pretty quickly. If you are tracking usage of a password manager, that's something that you can very easily track. The APIs for those tools are usually very good, but it kind of goes to the side of the mark about what it means to do a security practice. And so I would just say, use with caution when you're trying to make metrics around security culture and measure how active your culture is and how much you can push, how much temperature or appetite you have for installing more security practices. Using measurements to kind of make those data-driven decisions that we all love to make. You can make decisions that way, but I would say use with caution. And a data-driven decision for security champions, for people, is only, it will be good, but even better is a passionate person that is going to, move the temperature up, make people excited. So you can make decisions based on what your current culture is, or you can find drivers to actually take people on a journey and make the security culture more robust over time.
Yeah, and this is hosted by OWASP, so it tends to suggest security champions programs are very AppSec specific, right? But should we expand these programs beyond just AppSec folks?
That's a great question. At Atlassian, my previous company, we saw the success of the Security Champions program adopted by other kinds of programs. The model really lends itself well to any kind of passionate community. So we saw privacy champions, we saw accessibility champions grow in the time that I was there. And so, yes, absolutely. And then I think the other question that often is part of that same question is what I would call ambassadors. It's a different type of program where the company-wide security awareness initiative is part of that. So a company-wide security awareness training, security enthusiasts, to me, that is a different scope. It's a different kind of program, much more heavily focused on a kind of automated system. Maybe there's some gamification, but you're having a much larger audience. And so all of those scalable things kind of go out the window, and it becomes just like kind of a different operational beast. And so I love to see what I would call a security ambassadors program. It's that company-wide security enthusiast sort of thing where people go to Security Awareness Month. They love to volunteer and participate in what the security team has on offer. They come to the brown bag sessions, those sorts of things. Yeah, very cool. But I think one of the things that I've come to realize, and I talked about this inflection point where we're starting to see frameworks for security champions programs, is that it kind of muddies the water a little bit for a CISO, for a leader to kind of conflate those two types of programs, because it's really important right now for a CISO to understand what they're buying. And so I'm part of, I think, a group of practitioners that are starting to work towards frameworks as a kind of way to operationalize security champions. And so I love to see, the enthusiasts and the ambassadors and the company-wide programs, but I really hold those two separately, specifically so that these frameworks that are coming out from OWASP and others are, it's hard enough to kind of create a movement around a new type of practice. We've seen OWASP do it several times, and it has taken decades sometimes. So yes, there's definitely a lot of different ways that this model of just recognizing, supporting, and incentivizing people around an idea, that a lot of ways that could go, and it's often contagious. You will see this take on a life of its own, but making sure that as you grow, you don't lose sight of who your original cohort was and keeping them in your mind.
That's a great question to end on. Adrian helping us point out that despite us being application security, the audience for this could be well beyond developers, as well as the content well beyond just securing code. And while OWASP may have had decades to work on such things, we've only got about 30 minutes, Marisa. So I do have to say thank you. This was a great conversation. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. It was really great to talk to you.
Thanks everyone who's listening. Thanks again to Adrian. Thanks to John as well, who's working on a podcast champions top 10 list. So we'll keep you updated on that. Take care, everyone. And we'll take a quick break and return with news of the week.